Many of us come to market with something that we're passionate about and find that we have to adjust and tweak it. And that's not about being inauthentic. That's about understanding the things that you do and you say that unconsciously create resistance and moments of disconnection to your speech, to your positioning, and to your ability to actually make the difference you want to make. So this is not about changing who you are. This is not about throwing things out the window. This is about test, measure, iterate, think again. Test, measure, iterate, think again. That cycle is the most powerful one you can do. Welcome back to the Speaker Driven Business Podcast. And in this episode, we're getting ready to change gears to take you a little bit beyond the simple teaching and training that we've been doing with you for so long now. Don't get me wrong. We are still, wherever possible and wherever I believe it would be valuable to you, we are still going to unpack some of the training and the teaching and the how-tos that we've become quite famous for in this arena. However, as we go deeper and deeper with the guest interviews that we're coming, and trust me, we've got some incredible conversations coming up with those. I know that through the messages that you send us that you are loving those guest interviews that we've had so far. Well, we're going to go one step further and we're going to continue to bring incredible interviews and conversations with people who are what I call dream experts and dream speakers over this coming period of time. But as part of that as well, I wanted to start to deepen. I wanted to go beyond the transactional training and how-tos, and I know that you found that invaluable. We are still going to take a step back and pull back to actually sharing the how-tos and the trainings and teachings wherever we believe it's appropriate and wherever we believe we can really add some value without compromising what we do with the clients that we work with. However, I also want to take you deeper into what we need to be aware of with language, what we need to be aware of with messaging, with our positioning, with our sales, with what we think the problem is that we're solving. Because quite often what is tripping us up is not at the surface level. And whilst we all need to learn the mechanics of messaging and the mechanics of marketing and the mechanics of our speeches, there's only so far that A plus B equals C can take you. And that will get you started. But then to go deeper, we need to actually start to explore some of the deeper areas of our communication, of things that happen when we say things a certain way. We touched on it early in this series, talking about the charisma pattern, how language libraries show up in the world and how they relate to the way we make sense of the world and what we need to be aware of with speakers. So we did touch on that a little bit, but I want to go deeper. And this particular episode has been on my mind for a little while because of things that have been happening. And want to frame this. I want to get you thinking in the right space. I'm going to reference the work of Adam Grant. So Adam Grant blew into my world and I fell in love with his work with one of his books called Originals. Now that book really unpacked what it takes to really come up with an original perspective and creativity and lens. And it resonated with almost every fiber of my body. It was one of those books that just, you're always going to make sure you got a copy. It's always on your bookshelves. You're always pulling it out, referring to it, and flicking through it. It might be dog-eared. It might have highlighters. It might have notes in the margin. It's one of those books for me. And then he came out with the next book, which was Think Again. And that book blew my mind. The reason why it blew my mind, though, went far beyond the pages. Because in his book tour to launch that, it was during the pandemic. And so he did his book tour to launch that by doing podcast interviews. And obviously with Adam Grant's status, he did those interviews on some of the biggest podcasts in the world. And what really got my attention with that was Think Again was exactly what it means. He realized that some of the concepts he had gone to market with and claimed to market with and being loved for in Originals actually needed to be revisited because of new things that he learned, because of new exposures that he had. And he realized that that new information meant that he had to quite literally think again. And that's exactly what the book Think Again is all about. In those podcasts, though, he very humbly shared what it meant for him. And he also challenged us to think about the fact that we keep thinking of the world as rigid, and that once an opinion is shared, it must stay that way, that once we take a position on something that is research-based, it should never move. And that is at the same time as we have this juxtaposition with being creative and innovative and being different and unique in the market. And yet we think that we can create that as a static thing. And this is so true when it comes to who we are as speakers and thought leaders and experts and entrepreneurs. There is this paradox that we have in that to be known and famous in the marketplace and to be rebookable and referable, we actually have to have consistency in what we deliver as speakers, in our speeches, in our content, our message, in our positioning. But that's also locking us into thinking that it is static, and it's not. It's a live, breathing thing, especially when we're at the start of this career, this game called speaking. We actually made a decision some time ago to pull our 3-day workshops out of the marketplace and to double down on our longer term programs. So, Paid Speaker Accelerator, which is just launched, is now closed for 2025. We won't be doing that again or taking more people until 2026. That program is 7 months of meeting almost every single week. Our Speak More Collective has a membership minimum period of 12 months because we know it takes at least that long to get your head around some of the things. And my private client work is either really short term, as in you just want a strategy, or I need to work with you for 12 months if you want guaranteed results. So we've come to realize this because what I realized was in 3 days of teaching you how to put a keynote together, everyone walked out raving. Everyone loved it, but it wasn't necessarily enough to break into the market. Now, don't get me wrong, we've got some incredible case studies and some incredible results from that, but it wasn't always enough to get you sustainably into market, or you got into market with something and then needed to shift it. And that's one of the reasons why I've extended how we work with people. And we no longer do the quick fix. We absolutely do for those of you who can't afford our programs, but we now do it through masterclasses and small value workshops. Because the reason is I need time with you. If I'm actually going to create success with and for you, I need time with you because this process is so iterative, it's crazy. And I want to be by your side. If we're going to work together, I want to be by your side as you do that. I have to be prepared to think again, and so do you, right? All of my clients have to be prepared to iterate. And it didn't start here as a speaking coach. It started when, as a consultant, I was starting to move into the workshops and training and coaching and facilitation. And in 2014, I think it was, I was doing the start of year professional development for teachers. I was doing programs with a private girls' boarding school. I got along really, really well with the principal of the school. She was fabulous. She'd been brought in to turn it around. Their enrollments had been dropping. And I really liked her. She was a smart operator. She was passionate and she was very strategic in her approach. So naturally, I really liked her. So we fell into having a lot of conversations just sitting in her office whenever I was on site, whether it was to deliver or whether it was to meet with people. And those conversations really became quite trusting, I guess, in nature. We became more like friends than we were colleague and consultant. But I was sitting in her boardroom one day, and they had released this great new marketing campaign. They had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for new branding, new positioning, and a new marketing campaign. And the storyboards were all in her office because at the end of that week, she was going to be presenting the new campaign to the board of directors for the school. And I looked at it horrified because it was beautifully executed. The visuals were exquisite, but the tagline was X grammar school, girls' grammar school. And I'm not going to say which one, X girls' grammar school, where your daughter never gets lost in the crowd. Now, whilst that sounds like a great promise, there is an embedded unconscious command because of the way that we process language, which means that the message that would actually land in the marketplace was going to be your daughter gets lost in the crowd. The never or always isn't something we actually pick up on when we're processing from a market perspective. And so the unconscious embedded message or command to the marketplace, if that marketing campaign was going to be launched, was your daughter will get lost in the crowd, not never gets lost in the crowd. It's just lost in the crowd. The key message that we take away and process en masse is lost in the crowd, not whether it does happen or doesn't happen. For those who've done linguistic studies, this is almost fundamental. And when I pointed it out to her, and I made sure that I went really gently because I knew it would have been a massive investment, but I really wanted her to pull it up, she actually couldn't pull it up. And she was a little resistant to pulling up because obviously the creative agency had worked very closely with her to come up with it. And at the surface, like even when I first looked at it, I was like, that is fantastic. But there was an unconscious embedded command through the language simply because they didn't know about the power of linguistics and the intersection of words and how we process them. That campaign went ahead. The following year, when I came back to do professional development for teachers at the start of the year, the numbers had dropped, the campaign had failed, and they didn't know what was going on. And it sounds like it is too simplistic to bring it down to how we actually put our words together. But when you start to understand the psychology of words and the power of linguistics, which in my mind, I'm not a linguistics expert, I'm not academically qualified, but the way that I describe linguistics, it's the intersection, the collision of the words we say, the way people process it, and the energy and intentionality behind them. And if you're not aware of the unconscious or the embedded commands that occur in language very quickly and easily, then you're going to be bringing yourself unstuck. So it didn't start there. And it still plays out time and time again. So I've been working with a private client who we'd gone into an arrangement for 12 months. And because of things happening in his world, which are all fantastic, we're just on pause at the moment at about 6 months in. Now, we've gone to market with an incredible positioning tagline, and I am going to reveal it. And those of you in my world would probably know straight away who it is. And the tagline is creating rapid trust. And it is exactly what he does. He is incredible at the energetics of communication and being present and creating trust very quickly. Whenever he delivers a keynote or an internal workshop, it goes really, really well. But we've had this, I guess, this speed hump, if you like, where we haven't quite got the traction that we want to. And one of the things we agreed to do in this pause whilst the beautiful family things unfold for him was to just play around with it and just to see what was really happening with this, because the conversations are great. Initial interest is great. When he delivers, it's amazing, but then he struggles to stretch it any further, even though the experience of participants and delegates and audiences alike is extraordinary. And so we've really been mulling this over. And as we said, we're about 6 months in, we're about halfway through. And this is usually where if we're going to have to iterate, we get very clear on what it is. And I realized what was happening. What was happening was this. We will all have conversations about how we want to create rapid trust. We will all have conversations about the erosion of trust, especially in this current environment, this current marketplace. We love the conversations about it. It's the thing that panelists will talk about. It's the things that people do Q&A about. But to actually engage somebody to come into our organization, either as a conference speaker or an association speaker, to have someone come in and run workshops and really change how teams communicate and trust and really change how they do that. Sales teams do that with potential customers and things like that, to really, truly take that final step of commitment to engage that person to come in and do things. There is an unconscious first decision that must be made. Now, the unconscious first decision is the one that will actually drive the yes or no that comes out of somebody's mouth or the ghosting that may happen. So the unconscious first decision that someone must make in order to engage somebody to come in and create rapid trust or better trust, the unconscious first decision that must be made is we don't have great trust in our teams. We don't have great trust with our potential customers. We don't have great trust in our market. Now, it's more than likely unstated. It is more than likely very unconscious. That single having to go to that first decision is what is actually blocking the decision to bring this client in, even though he is sensational at what he does. Now, in that conversation, we are now playing, which is something that you have to do. We are looking at some very, very alternate areas. His content will not change, but the positioning in the market may need to change. What we've come across is something that might be so simple that we're literally smiling and laughing almost, because could it really be that simple? So now we're at a point where he is going to go and find ways to test and measure and play with that before we make any sharp right-hand turns. But my point is that we are 6 months into a 12-month relationship, and we are now starting to see the impacts and measurable impacts of having the wrong unconscious first decision, the wrong embedded first decision. And it's subtle and it's powerful, and we probably don't need to shift his positioning very much, but we do need to shift it because we're taking our audience unconsciously, or our decision makers and the people who will book us and pay for us, we take them unconsciously to a no while we're trying to get them to a yes. So this is what really matters. This is why we have to test and measure and iterate and actually think again. most of my job for those that trust me is thinking again. It happened with a woman that I've been working with for years, right? When we hit COVID. Now, she was, and again, those of you in my world are going to know exactly who I'm speaking about. So, in COVID, as we were entering it, she was launching herself as an unconscious bias speaker after some incredible global experience in the space, and it was launching well. And actually, in the early days of COVID, because locked doors and closed borders really it really meant we couldn't hide our bias and our discrimination and our prejudices anymore. It went through the roof to start with. And then all of a sudden, there was this shift, right? Because we became hypersensitive in organizations and teams and markets and communities, we became hypersensitive to bias, and it was almost divisive. We had people who were screaming for a reduction in bias, and we had people who were screaming on the other side saying we're not biased. And it became this really divisive marketplace and space and lane to be. And actually, what happened for this particular speaker is it became quite aggressive. So she was actually getting trolled and hate messages online. She's getting people telling her to shut up. She's getting people telling her to raise her voice. It was getting really, really aggressive. And what happened was it became an embedded first decision that if somebody was going to hire her, even though they'd done it previously, now in this heightened environment, if someone's going to hire her, they had to admit that bias really was a problem. Now, whilst until that point, that was a good thing and is a good thing now, at the most sensitive period of when we're in the pandemic, no one wanted to admit that they weren't getting it right. So we had two things happen simultaneously for her. Her marketplace suddenly got divided and aggressive, and the embedded first decision changed to one where they had to admit something they didn't want to admit in order to engage her. And that meant that we very quickly had to regather and reposition her. And we did that really well. But in that process, we also then test and measured what markets were we really going to take this new positioning and this redefined messaging within her content. And so what we also did with part of that was we ran in sprints and we would test a message or two messages in a specific market sector. We'd evaluate, and some of them she stayed in and some of them we needed to go and find a different one. So we test and measured every time. Her topic wasn't wrong, her content wasn't wrong, but the environment changed and we needed to be prepared to think again and to iterate. And this is why you need a really good strategic level coach by your side. And I don't care if it's me or somebody else, but you need somebody who can actually think this way. It actually also, it happened for us when I came out of the pandemic. So let me be very upfront. In 2016, and some of you would have heard the podcast, in 2016, I had a very public business failure. If you want to go back and listen to it, feel welcome to. Then in 2020, just as my first iteration of this business was taking off around the world, prior to Zoom really being a thing, was really taking off and was just about to cross the 7-figure threshold, the pandemic hit. And I went to zero revenue and no business within 6 weeks. And to have a business fail again through no fault of my own, through circumstances that felt like they were outside of my control, within a 4 or 5 year period was devastating. And so I made a decision to get out of it. I made a decision to go back to management consulting. And in actual point of fact, that's how I got through the pandemic. Every single person that I worked with, I absolutely worked with on their speaking, their communication, their presentations, their sales, things like that. So I was still doing the work, but as a management consulting, and I was never going to come back to this. As the pandemic closed, or as we started having more freedom of movement here in Australia, a previous client rang me. And the format prior to COVID had been our 3-day workshops that I mentioned earlier. And a former client rang me and she said to me, I need to update my keynote content. I want you to run your workshops again. I was like, I don't do them anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. And she kept ringing me. She kept harassing me. She kept messaging me. I was literally like, I'd be, no, maybe. No. Can you just off? No, maybe. And eventually it was a yes, but. And the yes, but was, I'll run it, but I'll come to you and you fill the room. And together we got to a point where we could fill the room and I went and delivered it. And in that process, and I've become so grateful to her, and she knows this, we've had multiple conversations of her because it pulled me back into this. It pulled me back into the work that I actually love. I do love being a management consultant, but nothing is more powerful than giving people the power of their voice and the way that they use their words to change their reality and their future opportunities. There is nothing more powerful. And so when we decided to go all in on this and I decided to rebuild a team around this, I did the right thing. I got my positioning clear. We got our programs quite clear. At that point, I decided I was only going to work with women. If I was going to come back into this marketplace, I was only going to work with women. And we also launched a content and marketing campaign. And we used our previous database. I used my socials and we used Facebook advertising. And what we created as an opt-in went off. It went ballistic. From a success perspective, there were thousands and thousands of people coming into our world through our social media, through our database. Everybody was opting into this incredible opt-in that we had. Our Facebook advertising agency were over the moon. So you imagine how dumbfounded they also were when I pulled the campaign up early. Normally, when a Facebook campaign works or an advertising strategy of any type works or any campaign that you're doing across your channels, across omni-channels, what you do is you double down on it, especially when you can actually quantify what's coming in and flowing in and actual leads into that or listings into database. But the reason why we pulled up was because it was attracting, it was wildly successful, but it's bringing the wrong people into our world. These were people who were broke or broken. These were people who was clinging into the opt-in, which was called the confident voice, which to my mind was, let's show you how to speak with more confidence. But most people were clinging into it from these campaigns and from our own socials who were broke or broken. And it was a really hard thing for me to say out loud because it felt incredibly judgmental, right? But I remember my tipping point, my breaking point actually came one day. I was doing a sales call with someone who'd booked in. She'd downloaded the opt-in, she'd gone through the sequence, she booked in for a call. And she was calling me from a phone box on the side of a dirt road in Western Australia. And for anyone, other countries in our audiences in other countries, that's a very remote place to be. And she was completely broken. She had just been discharged from a psych ward. And there was a big story behind it. And there was absolutely a story to tell and to share with that at some point, but not then. And at that point, I got off the call and I thought every single person coming our way from these campaigns are broke or broken. And I am generous and I will wrap my arms around our people, but I am not a therapist. I am a coach, right? I am not a charity. I'm a business. And so even though it was hitting all the markers, I realized it was hitting the wrong places. So our KPIs were being blown out of the water from a marketing, advertising, and positioning perspective. Our KPIs internally, which was our comfort with the people that were coming into our world, the stress on myself and my team from having to actually really, because we also weren't just walking away from people, we had to find ways to help them and resource them. It was just too much. So we had to shift and iterate. And in that process, we had to shift and iterate to a place that I didn't feel comfortable with. And that is this focus on being paid as a speaker. But I came to realize that that's actually the first question on everyone's mind. How do I get paid? How do I find the right audiences? And we've talked about this quite often. So I had to then force myself through the iteration. I had to then force myself into a different way of thinking about all of this because the evidence was clear. If we continue to do it my way, we will continue to struggle to ever be commercially viable, right? And I'll be honest, we still have to iterate. And there are still things that I'm thinking again, over and over again. And I am so grateful for the work of Adam Grant that gave us, many of us, the permission to embrace that properly. And I'm so grateful for the impact that both my experience prior to reading his book and my experience in this business means that I understand that you are going to have to evolve and iterate and sometimes think again. That you are going to have to deepen your understanding when something seems you can't put your finger on what's going wrong. You are going to have to be willing to listen to somebody who understands the deeper meaning and energy behind our words, or go there and deepen your learning yourself. You are going to have to be able to do that. And I am so grateful that I've come to understand that if we're really going to make a difference for people in the space, we have to be able to hold the space long enough for them to be able to safely test, safely iterate, and think things through over and over again if that's what they need to do on their way to commercial success. Because not everyone has instant success. And some of the people that we're going to be interviewing coming up, they've had organic success and instant success. Some others have had a real battle on their hands because they've had to fight for what they believe in. But whoever you are, we need to actually give you the success because most of us do not have instant celebrity. Most of us do not have instant fame. And most of us actually have to work at this. Many of us come to market with something that we're passionate about and find that we have to adjust and tweak it. And that's not about being inauthentic. That's about understanding the things that you do and you say that unconsciously create resistance and moments of disconnection to your speech, to your positioning, and to your ability to actually make the difference you want to make. So, this is not about changing who you are. This is not about throwing things out the window. This is about test, measure, iterate, think again. Test, measure, iterate, think again. That cycle is the most powerful one you can do. And you need to not just do it in your speech, you need to do it in your positioning, you need to do it in your messaging. Some of you actually need to do it in your sales. Some of you are unintentionally repelling people in your sales because you don't understand the psychology of questions, the power of language, and the way things land, and how our people, the people on the other end of the phone, the other end of the stage, the people who are in our market, how they are actually processing what it is that you're giving them. And until you understand that or have someone beside you, you may never actually get the breakthrough you're craving. So yes, it's a challenge. It's a different perspective. It's a different way to look at things. And it is going to take you time. But I promise you, if you're willing to take the time to stand with somebody who actually has got your back and providing the space for this to happen, and who is willing also, as I did with my first client that I mentioned, put my hand up and say, I've just realized we've unintentionally created the wrong embedded first decision. If you can find someone like that, if you can take your time, if you're willing to get in and iterate, I can promise you this, whether it's your speech, whether it's your positioning, whether it's your marketing or your sales, I promise you this, if you take the time, you allow the space to think again, it will absolutely 100% be worth it.